You're listening to Bigfoot Society, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. Tonight's story is from a man who spent decades living on the edge of eastern Maryland's forgotten forests long before the internet ever whispered the word Bigfoot. But in the pine thickets of Pocomoke, the dump sites of chicken farms, and the foggy curves of Meadow Bridge Road, something was already watching, and it growled and screamed and reached for him. It's a lifetime of first-hand encounters from a man who never went looking for Bigfoot but found him anyways. And this is the story of Allan and the road he'll never forget. So stay with us. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking to Allan today. Allan is an individual who's an outdoorsman and a hunter, and he's experienced some really interesting things over the years in Maryland and Kansas. So we've got a lot of interesting ground to cover today. But welcome to the show, Allan. How's it going?
It's going well, Jeremiah. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You know, I'm excited to talk to you today. This is an area, it's Eastern Maryland, which has come up a few times on the show already, but this is a part of Eastern Maryland that has not come up. So this is brand new territory for us on the show. But Allan, I want to make sure that you have the time to share what you've experienced. So feel free to take us back as far back as needs to go to when you started experiencing some of these situations.
Okay, thank you. It started back mid-'60s, like 66, 67, when I was 10 years old. And before I really get into it, I want to kind of give your listeners a background. From the lower eastern shore, on the eastern shore of Maryland, they call it the Delmarva Peninsula. A lot, especially back then, a lot of forested areas. My stomping grounds, lived in a place called West Post Office, and we had huge tracts of timber that butted up to what they call the Pocomoke State Forest, which is about 18,000 acres of trees, hardwoods and pine trees. E.S. Adkins had some stuff, J.I. Wells. They were all timber companies that also had huge tracts of timber that abutted the Pocomoke State Forest. And the fire roads through there, that's where my cousins and I, that was our stomping grounds. We had ponies. We'd ride through there, did a lot of that stuff. And then once we got rid of that, I had a dirt bike. And another neighbor friend of mine, we would go riding back through there with dirt bikes. So not too much of that whole area that we did not explore as kids. And in that area, it was not unusual for us to pack a lunch, leave in the morning, and not come back home until nightfall, because that's just how it was back then. So getting into the first encounter, if you will, like I say, it was in 66 or 67. I was 10 or 11 years old, somewhere in there. And my cousin and I, younger cousin Tim and I, were riding ponies back in a forest of J.I. Wells. We were about a quarter of a mile back in the forest and riding on one of the forest roads, the fire roads. And it was a sandy type road, and it was the type of sand that it was white on top, but if you scratched it, you would see the darker layer underneath. And we'd gone back there, and we came upon scratches in that road. And they were scratches about maybe 4 feet long, about 4.5 to 5 inches apart, like 3 of them. And you could see scratch marks, and they would overlap like something had come down there and done it. And no other footprints around, nothing. And at first we were thinking maybe it was a hawk that came down, but the way the scratches were far apart, that didn't make any sense to us. So we were actually just sitting on the ponies, just kind of discussing what these things were, looking at them, trying to figure it out as, kids. And the ponies were nervous. I mean, normally they would be fine. They just sit there, because like they rode these things all the time. But this day they were just kind of antsy. And after about 5 minutes or so looking at these things, there was this growl. It came from like 30, 35 feet in the brush away from us. And, we're like perked up. And then the bushes just started, shaking violently. And we didn't have, we don't have bear on the Eastern Shore. At the time, we didn't have coyotes. There was nothing really there. And that we could attribute that, but that's the ponies were like, we've had enough. They took off. We didn't try and stop them because it scared the crap out of us too. So it went on home. So that was kind of the first oddity that we encountered. And then if we flash forward to like 1969, I would have been about 13 years old. By that time, we sold the ponies. I had a dirt bike. And back then there was, it's a big chicken integrator on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, Purdue Farms. And they had in the Pocomoke Forest, there was like egg production. It was an experimental poultry farm that they wanted to get back out away from any other chicken houses. To maintain cleanliness and all that kind of thing in what they were doing for the research. And there was a local hatchery in the town of Princess Anne, which was the nearest town where I lived, called Googe Hatchery. Well, back in this forest and back in the time there, if people had dead chickens that they picked up out of the poultry house, they would just have open pits and they would just throw the birds out in these open pits at the time. And turkey buzzards would come in and eat them. And, anything, raccoons would sometimes go in there. And so that was not unusual. And there was a dump like that back in the forest where Winton Googe used to dump the old eggs there. And then Purdue Farms, they had this open dump back there. And there were creatures seen. Matter of fact, it made quite a stir in town at the time, and they called them the egg people. And like I say, it's going on in 69. Well, I was 13 and heard all this. Well, me and a buddy of mine, we got our dirt bikes and rode through there because we knew exactly where the place was back in that forest. We rode back. We didn't see any of the egg people, but around the perimeter, where like coming out of the swampy woods, the woods itself, we did find footprints. And the footprint, it was like 16, 17 inches long. It looked like a human footprint, just larger. And then we found a couple of smaller ones that maybe 13 inch, something like that in the area. And at the time, being that old, we didn't know what Bigfoot was. Nothing like that. It was just weird. And we kind of thought, well, okay, maybe it's just weird people out here. Who knows? But I do know that there was a flap going on in town at that time. And a number of people went out and supposedly saw these things. Would go out there at night and see them in the light of their cars. They'd pull up and all that. I was there during the day. And so I didn't get to see anything there.
Allan, real quick, do you remember anything about how people were describing the egg people?
There was two different ones. Some of the egg people, they described them as, beings coming up with like whitish looking egg-shaped heads, which I'm assuming would account for the sagittal crest, on these things. But then a lot of them also described Bigfoot looking like creatures, tall, hairy, humanoid-like individuals. But the local term, just when they said egg people, because of the egg dump, that's what kind of stuck. That's the moniker that everybody used in the area, was the egg people.
Okay, that makes sense. And then when you had these pits of dead chickens, approximately how many dead chickens were being thrown out there? Are we talking like hundreds or just a few?
Oh, yeah, it could be hundreds. Some of these poultry houses, and I don't know if you or your listeners are familiar with how they grow chickens, poultry houses, but some of these poultry houses would contain anywhere from 20 to 25,000, 20,000 to 25,000 chickens. Yeah. So it was not unusual to come up with anywhere from maybe 10 to 15 dead chickens a day during an 8-week period that they would dump in these pits. And some of these farms had multiple poultry houses like this. So yeah, it could be dead chickens in the hundreds.
Okay.
And got downwind to one of these things on a July and August day, you definitely knew that, something was there going on. But yeah, that's anymore. I think they use incinerators and they just burn them down. They don't have the open pits anymore, as far as I understand now.
Okay. Thank you. Feel free to continue.
Okay. Next, back up into like the next year in the 1970s, and this is just anecdotal, but I was like 14 years old, and there is a place down in Somerset County, the lower part of Somerset County, called Chrisfield. It's a little town on, the river. I want to say it's the Appomattox River down there. And there is a place that a Bigfoot was supposedly seen, and the area, which I find interesting, was Apes Hole Creek, right off of Apes Hole Road down in Chrisfield. And that's just like, Ape Mountain that you see and all that. I just wonder where the Apes Hole name came from. But there have been Bigfoot sightings down on Apes Hole Creek in Somerset County down there. Just, that's another thing that just kind of went forward that I heard about growing up. I lived in an area called West Post Office, and the reason it was 4 miles outside of Princess Anne, and there was a man named West that had a post office out there, hence the name. So it was West Post Office Road, which was the road that I lived on when I grew up and when I first got married. In 1974, which was also the year I graduated from high school, there was supposedly a Bigfoot sighting on West Post Office Road. It was like a road crossing back in that area, which I found interesting because, again, that was my stomping ground. That's where we went all the time. And then again in 1976, there was another sighting out there in West Post Office, similar type thing. Now, in 1976, my parents had a convenience store on Route 13 right outside the town of Princess Anne on the highway. And I had gone in there one Saturday morning. I worked for my parents at the time in that store. And I had gone in and opened the store. I'd gone in early, opened the store. My mom and dad came to relieve me, just, like 9:45, something like that. I went home and got home shortly, just a little bit after 10 a.m. At my parents' place. That's where I was living. Got out of the car. And at the time, this would have been like late August, last week of August, first week of September. I remember because the Maryland State Fair was going on up in Timonium, and all our neighbors had kids with dairy cattle and pigs and that kind of stuff. They were all showing them. There was no one home in our neighborhood at the time. When I got out there in that little community we had, I was alone. Nobody else was around because most all of them were up at the state fair up in Timonium. Well, I got out of my car in the driveway, and I heard this moaning coming from the woods about a half mile, would have been to the west of us. And I had never heard anything like that before. And like I say, we didn't have coyotes there. We had owls. I mean, I've heard a screech owl or hoot owls, it was nothing like that. And it was, dogs howling sometimes, but it didn't even sound like a dog's howl. And it was undulating. It would go up and down and up like, ooh, ooh. I'm not doing it justice. One of the closest things I've heard is if you've ever heard the Ohio howl that's online, it was very similar to that. There was another, and I cannot remember where it was, but I heard on another Bigfoot program like almost a year ago, some recordings, And one of those recordings sounded identical. And I cannot for the life of me find that again. But it was like I told my wife at the time, my first wife has passed away and I got remarried a year ago. I told her that's what I heard. That moaning, roar-like thing. So that I sat out on our front steps, on our front porch, and I listened. And what got me was, you would think something would, and you would hear the breath intake and then it would start again. This was continuous. It never stopped. It was just to the point, okay, well, maybe it's a recording or something, but it was coming from the woods a half mile to the west of me. So after about an hour of listening to it, I've got to see what this is. So I started walking down the road. I walked down to our next door neighbor's house, which was a half mile away. They had 2 huge brick pillars on either side of their driveway. So I walked down there, was kind of standing on the road in between where those 2 pillars were for their driveway, looking to the south to the woods line. And the woods was about maybe 80 yards from the road is where that little piece of woods jutted out. So, and it was coming from that direction. So I'm looking, trying to see what's there. And almost as soon as I stopped and looked at the woods and trying to figure out what was what, the moaning stopped. So I'm like, okay, that's just, so I keep looking. And about, I don't know, maybe 45, 50 yards back in the woods, there was a couple of maple trees that were, I'm going to say maybe 40 feet tall, something like that. Slim maples that coming up. All of a sudden, just started violently shaking. I mean, back and forth, shaking. There was no wind that day, but shaking so hard back there, I could hear the leaves going whoosh, whoosh, whoosh as they were going through the air. You're just crazy shaking. I mean, something had to be incredibly strong to just, shaking it. And there was enough underbrush, I could not see what was doing it. And as then the shaking, it went and it stopped. And all of a sudden I hear this roaring scream. I mean, the intensity was crazy. I mean, and I know it's a cliche, like, oh, I felt it in my chest, but I felt it it's like that thing just went through you and just vibrated this. I have never heard anything the volume, and just like, he started up and then ended up at, roar, and ended up in this high-pitched scream when it stopped. And then the trees started going crazy again. Well, I'm a half mile from home, standing there, nobody around. It freaked me out. So I started running home. I ran about 20 yards and then realized, okay, I don't want to turn my back. So I kind of went there, and then I kind of crab walked as fast as I could, keeping my eye to make sure nothing was following me. Got back home. I was shaking, sat on the front porch again. And then as soon as I got maybe 50 yards away, the tree stopped shaking, and then that moaning started again. And it continued until just, about 2 o'clock or so, when my mom came home from the store that afternoon. She got out of the car. I'm sitting on the front steps. She gets out of the car, standing there. Before she shut the car door, she stopped and she turned and looked down, towards the woods down there, looked back at me. She said, "What in the world is that noise?" I don't know, but it's been going on ever since I got home at 10. I don't know when it started before that. So I outlined everything for her. She stayed out there and listened to it for another 5 minutes, and then shrugged and went inside. And then about 15 minutes later, it stopped. Never heard it again in my life. I had never heard it before that, never heard it after that. Just bizarre, but whatever it was, that was spooky for not seeing anything. Again, what can shake trees like that? And I'm figuring, okay, it can't be a recording because it quit, did other things, and then started again. So I don't know. That was just bizarre to me.
Allan, that's really intense. Would any of your neighbors share, things like that they experienced as well, or do you think it was a one-off situation for the area?
I know, because I lived there until 96 when I moved out here to Kansas. And again, there was nobody there. And my wife, or my mom and dad, unfortunately, have passed away. So my mom can't attribute it to it. But, I mean, it's never happened since that I know of. I don't know. I know that some of the neighbors that were there, well, I mean, that's been some time ago, are gone now. I know that I'm going to talk about my neighbors that lived across the road. I think he has since passed away. So I don't know of anybody that, could corroborate that right now, because like I say, when I got home, I was the only one there until my mom showed up. And then once it stopped, I never did hear that again, that kind of thing. So I don't know. I mean, it's something you could check. If I get back to Maryland, I may just kind of go back there and talk to them. But I don't know. I don't know what to tell you on that one, Jeremiah. But back again in that same neighborhood, because that was in, like I say, 76, and nothing really happened, until again, like 1981. So like 5 years later. I had gotten married, built a house right next door to my mom and dad's place, just to the west of them. And they deeded me some land on there. And my wife and I, it was a summer evening, I want to say it was in July, was hot. And my wife and I were just, a beautiful night though. Went out, we're sitting on the front steps of our house. It was about 11 p.m. I want to say it was like a Friday night. And we hear across from us in the woods directly to the south, and John had a poultry house. There was a big field, poultry house, and then kind of woods beyond that. And we heard from the woods, which the woods from us would have been about a half mile away, I guess, something like that, back to the south. Screaming, and it sounded like a woman being murdered. I mean, just chilling screams. And you would hear it in one area, and then you would hear, off to the woods, off to like the east, and another way. We ended up kind of piecing together whatever was doing it. It was coming from 3 different areas back in there. Something was, was screaming, something else was screaming, and so forth. And I mean, the only way I can describe it, it sounded like a woman scream that was being murdered. Just very loud. Again, it was a half mile away, but it sounded like it was like 10 feet in front of it. It was just, again, the volume was incredible on what that was. And it went on, that screaming went on for like a couple hours. I mean, we sat outside and listened to it. It went on for a couple hours, and then it finally stopped. And my wife at the time, she was from Princess Anne. She asked me, she goes, "What in the world was that?" I don't know. I've lived here my entire life. I've never heard anything like that before, screaming like that. So about a couple weeks later, it started again, about the same time at night. We got out there and started hearing that thing again going off. It didn't last as long this time. And I want to say this was like a Saturday night or something when we heard it again. But the same thing, sounded like a woman being murdered, back in there. Well, I went over that the people that used to live there had retired farm, sold it, and sold it to this other guy that was from city. And I went over and was talking to him. I said, do you have any idea what that went the next morning? And I asked him, do you have any idea what in the world that was? And he's like, oh, I think it's birds mating. Like, okay, I've never heard mating birds at night before, number one. And number two, I've lived here all my life. I've never heard that before. If it was birds or something, I'm sure I would have heard that, but I didn't. That's just, it sounds bizarre. And then he was telling me that, he goes, yeah, well, it's weird. And I said, well, have you noticed anything else weird going on? And he goes, well, yeah, there's some stuff. So I walked back. He had in the back part of his farm, back by a backfield by woods, there was like a livestock pond that was in the southwest corner of the property that was only about 20 feet or so from the wood line. And we walked back there. He goes, yeah, I found this the other day. And it was like a button buck deer corpse, laying out there. And like the front left forequarter was ripped off of the thing. So it only had 3 legs, something ripped off, and the neck was broken. And he's like, yeah, I think this must have been hit by a car. Like, okay, you're a half mile from the road back here. I can't imagine a buck getting this far on 3 legs with a broken neck. That doesn't make sense. And it was laying right down there by this pond. The other thing that was unusual about it was no buzzards had hit it. And where we are again, they would put the dead chicken. I mean, we had buzzards everywhere feeding on the carrion of these chickens and so forth. He had a pit, he had that stuff too. And that thing, he said, yeah, I found this like a week ago, and nothing else had gone there to scavenge on it, which I found odd. And then he was telling me that we had this Monocan watershed. It was tax ditches in the area, which it would drain the farmland, run out and run to the Monocan River, because it is so low and kind of swampy areas on the eastern shore of Maryland there, that they put this thing in when I was just a kid, put all these tax ditches in to help drain the farmland to make it, more productive. Well, doing that, I mean, we have seen river otters would swim up, come down these ditches and all, and muskrat would be there. Well, at the time, muskrat pelts and the meat was a delicacy back there, and people would trap muskrats, go and ditch, you do that. Well, he had retired. He was a disabled vet, and he trapped muskrats in the ditches there. And he used to go out about 10 o'clock at night was the last time he would go check his muskrat traps. And he used to carry just a little 22 pistol with him, that if he had to dispatch a muskrat, he could do that. Well, he said he was out one night, and this was during that same kind of time frame, and said he was the furthest ditch down from his house to the east, right before a woods line that J.I. Wells owned, that a big timber company owned that woods there. He was down in the ditch, or was going over there, got down in the ditch, and the ditches are deep. I mean, they are some pretty good sized ditches that drain this thing out, to the point where the bank is so high on this ditch, you kind of had to get on your butt and scoot down, because the bottom where the ditch bottom could maybe be like 6 feet down from the bank. So we're talking some serious ditches. Well, he had got down there. The water was down in this ditch, so there was a slight bank before you hit the water. So he got down, was going to tend to his last trap. So he slid down the ditch, was bending over the trap to fix it. I don't remember. I think he said it was sprung, but there was nothing in it. Said about that time he noticed something, heard a noise to his right, and that by the time I looked over there, he saw something about 30 feet away, down like a dark blob, come up and turn, because he was standing between whatever this was and the wood line, and so it came charging down that ditch bank, right past, came by and knocked him over and kept on going up and into the woods. And he said, I had no idea what it was. And I said, well, does that have to be? No, it hadn't. He said, but what I did do is I stopped checking these traps after dark. And now when I go check them, I carry a 44 with me along with my 22. Because he said that apparently it just, freaked him out back there. So that happened, and that was right across the street from where I lived. And after that, nothing. I mean, again, we didn't hear that screaming sound anymore. And I don't know if he didn't say anything or if it was stuff that happened at night, but nothing else in our area that I hear was attributed to that part of it right there. But I said earlier, I would go to the Pocomoke State Forest. I used to turkey hunt and squirrel hunt back in the state forest from, oh my gosh, like as a kid right on up until I moved out here to Kansas in 1996. And going out in that Pocomoke State Forest, it's on a thing called Old Furnace Road back in through there. And sometimes I'd go back there squirrel hunting, and you'd see you weren't supposed to drive a vehicle on those fire roads. So hunters would park right on Old Furnace Road and walk back in if they went hunting. And many, many times as I would go back there to hunt, I was the only car there. I mean, I was basically by myself, the only person there within miles of anything going back in this state forest ground. And I would walk back in, and there was, I had certain places that I really liked to go. And sometimes I'd be back in there squirrel hunting, and I would hear knocks. And not unusual, the farmers, if they had a disc, sometimes a disc, because of the ground, the very moist ground that we have, would clog up, and the spaces between the disc gangs would fill up with dirt. And farmers would get there and they'd have to beat them, and you hear this donk, knocking sound as they're clearing these disc gangs out. I would be back hunting in the woods, and I heard that, and I just, okay, that's a farmer clearing out a disc gang. And it was only after about a half dozen different times hearing that it finally occurred to me, well, wait a minute. They do this generally in the spring when there is tillage season going on, is when they do this. Right now, we're talking, October, November. They're not doing it. They're not banging it. They're not using these things. And I'm in the middle of the state forest. There's not a field for miles away from me. So, and at the time, I was not aware of, Bigfoot tree, not this, that, or the other, but you would just hear these knocks, and I didn't think too much of it. You would hear like one knock here and then another knock, and just naive that I was, okay, it's not bothering me. I didn't pay much attention to it. And you'd sometimes be going back there, and I would hear whistles. And I know a bird can whistle, they do that kind of thing. But where a bird is like, or, making some kind of a melodic whistle, this was more, it was like a monotone whistle, like a type thing, which just seemed odd. But again, maybe it's, who knows, maybe it's a bird. I'm not an ornithologist, I don't know. So I didn't put too much stock in that either, but I would hear whistles. And then if I finally pieced together, okay, when I went down a certain fire road in this state forest, I might hear whistles. If I went another one, I didn't. So I don't know, if that was a territory thing or what. there was another area that if I walked back in, there was a little ditch that I would cross going back. And I mean, we're talking, I'd sometimes be half mile, 3/4 mile back, in the woods, and I would still hunt. I would walk down these fire roads, squirrel hunting. And there was one particular area that I would get to, and I would say probably 40% of the time when I would cross this ditch, every sound in the forest would stop. You wouldn't hear squirrels. You wouldn't hear birds chirping. I mean, you didn't even hear the sound of insects buzzing. But I would get back in there, and this feeling of creepiness would just come over me, and I've always felt like, okay, something's watching me. And invariably, I don't know if some sense is left over from back in the day as humans, but I would always be drawn to a certain area. And I'm like, whatever it is over there. There's something over there watching me. Well, a lot of times I'll just sit here, be quiet for a half hour. Maybe I spooked something, so I would just stand there and try to let the woods come back to normal. And nothing. I mean, it just stayed silent, and it got to the point where I finally felt so uncomfortable that I'm like, well, I'd start walking back. And as soon as I crossed that little ditch again and got back, the birds would start again, everything would be normal. And I'm like, and that didn't happen every time. Like I said, 60% of the time I could still hunt back there and be fine. I've killed squirrels out there, not an issue. But again, 40%, this would happen. And since it didn't happen every time, I would keep going back there and just, kind of test the waters. And if it felt off, I'm like, okay, fine. I'm not going back there. If everything seemed normal, I would go on and do my thing. So, found that. And then, I went down a different route, one I normally didn't go down one day. And in the V of a tree, it had started to rot, but there was half of a deer carcass in the V of this tree. Now, it was probably 6 feet up in the air is where the crotch of this tree went up. And this thing was drooped. It was a doe, drooped over in the front. And I went around the back, and the back half from the shoulders was gone. It was just the front half kind of set in this tree, front legs, and then the head and neck kind of folded over the front legs in this tree. I'm like, what in the world does that? I didn't know if, maybe the tree, the deer jumped up in the tree and got hung up and rotted, something. So I looked at the base of the tree to see, okay, did the back half, did it fall in there, or bones dug around it? Nothing. It was just the front half of that deer in the crotch of that tree. What does that? What could have caused that? I don't know. So that's kind of some of the things that happened there. And then in 1989, by that time I had 3 little boys, been married, had 3 kids. And sometimes we would take the kids up to the movies up in Salisbury, Maryland, and come home, and my wife would shop. The movie theater we went to was in a strip mall, or not strip mall, but a large mall. And I would take the kids to the movies while she would shop, and then we'd grab a bite to eat late and then head home. Well, this one particular night, I want to say it was in the fall. We'd been to the movies, saw a late show. She had been shopping, and it was like 10:30, 10:45, something like that at night, where I'm coming home. And through that forest, coming back out of Fruitland, Maryland, there's a thing, it's called Meadow Bridge Road. At the time, there was a large stretch of woods that was uninhabited. I mean, there was nothing there. We used to own a farm right on would have been the south edge, I guess, of that, where Meadow Bridge Road started from Friendship Church. Back up there, we had a 100-acre farm right there. And then from that point on through for, I want to say 5 or 6 miles or more, there was no house. It was just woods. Road went through the woods. Well, this particular evening, as we were coming home, it was like a full moon, but there was clouds over it, starting to get a little bit chillier, so that we had some fog coming in. So I was coming home. I had 3 little boys in the back, my wife with me. We're coming home. I come around down Meadow Bridge Road, and I hit this stretch of woods, and there's a curve on it. And as I'm coming up, because I've got low beams on because of the fog, I mean, make sure, and I'm not going real quick again because of the fog, and I got my kids with me. Well, I see like reflectors in my headlights. Well, that's odd. I mean, I've driven this road hundreds, if not thousands of times. I don't remember them. And as I get up closer, I realize, okay, wait a minute. As the moon would peek out of clouds periodically, and it would kind of illuminate it a little bit more, help out. And as I'm creeping up, then I realize, wait a minute, what is that? There's something on the side of the road. And at first I didn't know if it was deer or what, but the closer I got, I realized, well, that looks like, humanoid something right there. And I thought, I see something down, like on the ground, and I thought maybe it was a car accident. So started slowing down, and as I get up, then I'm realizing the shine I thought was reflectors. I'm thinking, oh, that must be somebody there, and it's reflecting off their glasses. They must be wearing glasses. So I roll the window down, and I'm kind of coming up to see them, and I stopped, and I probably was not 6 feet away from them. And there is a ditch, a swale that goes down between the woods right there and the side of the road. And I'd kind of angled over towards that side of the road, which in retrospect was not the smartest thing because there was a curve right there. But thought something, so I pulled over, rolled the window down, and I'm asking, hey, is everything okay? You guys need help? And as I'm looking, the moon peeked out again, lit up, and I'm like, what am I? I realize, okay, this is not people I'm talking to. So the one was laid down on the bank, would have been the far bank of the swale away from me, and was on like right hip, kind of laying on the ground, supporting their body with their right arm up, kind of reclining like you would see in something like Cleopatra would do in some of the movies. You see that reclining position she would do. So that was like that. The other one had been stooped over and was, at the time, I thought it was only like 6 foot tall. I thought it was a person. Well, when I stopped, the reclining was looking at me, looked over at the other one, and made this like mewing sound, like almost like a cat. Just this little like whimpering mewing sound. As I'm assuming it was a female, I don't know. Looked for me, looked up at the one standing. The one that came up, stood all the way, and was 8.5 feet tall. And I realized was standing in the swale, and it was up. I had to look up from the car up at him, or I'm assuming him. I couldn't tell because it was dark. I mean, their faces, but I could see like one solid color, just huge. I mean, I realized, oh my God, these things are immense. And it never took it. And when I saw it was looking at me. It never stopped looking at me from the whole time it stood up, full time, And when that one mewed at it, this one just kind of just grunted and reached out the left arm towards the car. And I mean, it was on, because I had my window down. If it had leaned in, it could have snatched me right out of the window. It was that close. But it came in, and I'm just seeing this huge hand. And I mean, the hand looked like it was the size of a baseball. I mean, it was huge, coming over, but 5 finger, I mean, a hand coming over. And then I could see hanging down off the arm hair that was like 4 or 5 inches long, just kind of hang as it reached over. And I was, shocked. And I'm realizing, okay, I didn't really feel fear at the time, but I was just awestruck. And then it hit me, wait a minute, you got your wife and 3 kids in the back of, you need to get out of here. So I just, I just kind of pulled off and drove on home and got there. And we didn't say that my wife, we didn't speak till we got home. And then we're like, what was that? And she's like, I don't know. And then we were trying to think, was it somebody cool? We were trying to just figure out what in the world we had just seen. But I don't know. I mean, was it somebody in a suit? I doubt it. I mean, who would be there and think somebody's going to come along that special, time of night in the fog? I don't know. But my wife was talking to a friend of hers about it, maybe a month or 2 months after that. And the friend's like, where'd this happen? So she told her. And her friend was like, well, my son, they went out in that area because there's a little clearing in the woods. They went out there and they were partying, would go out and like have a beer bust and that kind of thing, take pickups back there talking. She said they were out there, I want to say like a month or just prior to that in the summertime, because we came out there in the fall. And they'd been back there and something had stayed in the woods and was circling, could hear something big walking through, crunching around them, the clearing they were in. And then finally they got headlights up and looked and saw this huge humanoid looking thing. They said it was like 8 feet tall, going around in the dark. It scared the crap out of these kids. They take off and she's like, yeah, they saw, they don't know what it was they saw, but it freaked them out when that happened. So, they're that kind of a thing there, because that was pretty much the thing. That was within like a mile of where I had seen these things on the side of the road.
Have you ever seen anything else that looks like what you saw that day? I mean, that's really weird.
Yeah. Like I say, I had another sighting out here in Kansas, and I wish that it was so dark. All I could see was like a dark face. I couldn't see a lot of features because it was at night. The moon was going in and out of clouds. The one time I did get to see it with the fog, I can't give specific. It was just dark colored, and maybe it was 2 huge people in dark coveralls. I don't think so, because I saw hair coming off. I mean, and the way they moved, it just, like I said, I was 6 feet away from them. I could just, man. Yeah, I mean, it was bizarre. And why the one, I didn't know if I keep saying she because the mewing sound, if maybe something had happened, if she maybe got hit by a car and was laying there. I don't know why one would be reclining right there and the other one had been bent down, like maybe it was lying there too. Maybe they were wrestling and then it was getting up when it heard me coming, maybe. I don't know, but it just, when I pulled up, they were both kind of looking at me. And like I say, the one that was reclined turned and looked at the other one and made that little mewing sound. And it didn't look at it, it kept focused on me. and just did that grunt and reached out towards the car. And I looked at that. And that's when I'm like, okay, I got to get. So yeah, I've never seen anything like that back there before. That was new. But like I said, I didn't really feel fear at the time. Just amazement. I mean, I'm trying to piece together what I see, what I'm seeing here, and it doesn't make any sense. I mean, you see these things. I don't think anybody's ever really prepared when you see one of these things, because there's nothing really that you can do to prepare yourself for that, because it is just, the size is so amazing. And I mean, you hear growing, oh, these things aren't supposed to exist, but yet they're standing right in front of you, kind of a thing. So I thought, well, maybe, that was a one-off kind of a deal. Well, like I say, he moved out to Kansas in 96. So I'm out here, and I mean, you only hear about, the deal out in Northwest America, out that way, the Pacific Northwest. Nobody really expects Bigfoot to be on the East Coast anywhere. I certainly did not expect him to be in Kansas. Moved out here because we don't have the woods here that we had back in Maryland. But I'm retired. I was a service manager, HVAC. I've been in the HVAC, refrigeration trade, and controls, HVAC controls. And I worked for a contractor up in Wichita. And as I was coming home, I would come home through, the countryside. And there was one spot I would come down, and it's near a little area called Beaver Creek that comes down through a county road, and big fields there. And I would come that way every day from work. And I always look there because I would always see like turkey in the field or deer, something like that. The whole time, I never, ever saw a human in there. I never saw the farmer because they would have crops there sometimes. I never saw them harvest. I never saw a human being in that area. And this road comes down Cali 3 to Cali 4. I mean, it dead ends into this thing. But there's a gravel road that goes from that T intersection and goes on back to, well, they call it the Arkansas River here. Anywhere else in the free world, it would be the Arkansas River. So, but that goes back to the river. So there's nothing back there. It just goes back into overgrown, and then the river right back there. Well, I came home. It was I want to say like January 2nd, 2014, something like that. Was coming home early. The boss let us go early because after the first of the year. And it was, I want to say 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that. Still daylight. Pretty day, kind of chilly, but pretty day. A little bit of breeze blowing. And as I got down there, I always looked towards that to see if there was deer or turkey, anything there. This time I come up to the stop sign and I look and I see something. There's a woods on either side, little stand of trees on each side of this gravel road that comes up to this field by where Beaver Creek runs through. And finally I saw something in that road, and I'm like, what in the world? I mean, it was taking up half the width of the road and was huge. And at first I thought, oh my God, this is the first person, it's somebody on a horse that I'm looking at. And I'm sitting there, and because it was kind of in the shadows with the trees, all the leaves, well, the leaves were gone. There was some old one dead was hanging there, but a little bit of shadows from the trees and some cedar trees, that kind of stuff. So I'm looking at it, and the more I looked at it, I thought, this is odd because it's all one color that I'm seeing right there, all kind of dark. And I mean, now is it because it's coming towards me? Like, okay, it doesn't really looked like somebody on a horse, and the width of it and the height of it, it was huge. And it was from where it was from me, was probably 400 yards away. So that'll give you an idea of the distance. And this thing was huge from that far away. So I'm sitting there watching it, and it's coming towards me, and I am trying to puzzle out what in the world I am looking at. And then somebody came up behind me and tapped the horn, and I realized, oh crap, So I went to the left and turned and went maybe a half mile, and screw this. I turn around, I got to see what that is. So I go back again, and this time I should have just pulled across from there into that gravel road. I wasn't even thinking about that at the time. But I go back this time, and I turn into that gravel road, and I stop, and whatever it was had come out of the road by this time, around the corner of that little woods, was in the field, and was walking back in the field back towards the river where it had come from, but in the field this time. And now I'm seeing it, and I'm like, okay, whatever. It's on two legs. It is freaking immense. And what was really odd was I'm seeing this thing. Now when it was there in the sunshine that I'm seeing it, it was kind of like a cinnamon color, right? It was dark in the shade back there, but it was like a cinnamon color. But as I'm looking at it, the color, it's undulating. It's like variegated. And I'm like, what in the world? Almost like, neon signs where they fly. This thing was flying up and down the body of this thing. And it finally hit me. It reminds you, if you see wind as it's blowing through a wheat field, you see the lighter colored and then the darker stalk, how you get that color variation as the wind blows through. And it hit me, okay, it's the hair, the wind is blowing that hair, and I'm seeing the color, and then the undercolor is the hair's being blown, and that's why it's up and down as the wind things are blowing, wind tendrils, this thing up and down. That's why it's changing color. And I mean, what is this? Because it's, again, just one big blob with that, and you can see the thing. It looked like it was like 5 feet wide. It had to be 10 to 12 feet tall. Was huge. And I sat there and watched it, and it was making ground quick. Huge strides. It wasn't running, just walk, but the strides it was taking, it was covering ground fast. And within probably 10 minutes, well, I don't even know if it's 10 minutes, maybe 8 minutes, it had gone from there, and I lost it in the trees again. It went angled back in the trees and went off to wherever it was going. But I looked at that, and what the heck? I go home, and I'm telling I think I just saw a Bigfoot. And he's telling my wife, and she's like, why didn't you take a picture of it? You got a camera right on your phone. It's one of those things. I was so awestruck, it never even occurred to me to pull that out to try and take a picture of it. I'm like, crap, should have, but didn't, because once you finally realize it, the shock is like, holy mackerel, saw one of these things again, to me it was all again, because I'm pretty sure I saw one or two of them, in Maryland. And so I talked to one of the local guys here. They've got a cryptid thing, and met him out there, told him about the encounter. And he was telling me, he says, yeah, in 2014, in November of that year, so it would have been after, my sighting, because I didn't tell him till, only like a year or so ago. And he said he had seen one cross the road only a half mile from where I saw that there in November of 2014. So apparently whatever is hanging in that area, running the river up and down in there. And that's that's been it so far. I haven't seen anything since. But that's kind of my story, Jeremiah, from as a kid to a senior now. That's kind of some of the weird stuff that's happened to me.
Wow, Allan, those are some wild accounts. And I mean, man, that area in Eastern Maryland, that Pocomoke area, that needs to be looked more into, or maybe I just haven't heard of it, because it sounds like there were other weird things happening in that area too, right? Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there are all kinds of folklore, ghost stories that you can get on there. There's a cemetery back in there, that, I mean, it's a cemetery, so there are people still do there, and they get weird things happen in the cemetery. So there's paranormal stuff. There are Bigfoot sightings. There are supposedly dogman sightings, and between you and me, I'm just as glad I did not run into one of them. But in that area, it's supposed to be somewhat prevalent, from what I understand, in some dogman stuff back there. But yes, definitely the Pocomoke State Forest, like I say, it's an area of high strangeness all back and through there. So yeah, it definitely needs to be looked into some more.
I hope maybe some people listening to this will come forward with other things that they've experienced in the area. But Allan, thank you so much for coming on the show. I mean, you shared an entire lifetime of just really weird stuff from Eastern Maryland, and also more recently Kansas. And just thank you for coming on the show. You're always welcome to reach out if anything else weird comes across your plate. But I appreciate you chatting today, sir.
Well, I thank you for having me. And definitely, yeah, I keep looking around now because of what I have seen. I'm always on the lookout. And if I do see anything else, I will definitely let you know.
Just want to take a minute to say thank you for listening to this episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. Allan's story is one of the rare ones that spans generations, from ponies and fire roads in the Pocomoke Forest to the chilling moment when a hand reached toward him through the fog. A huge thanks to Allan for sharing decades of encounters from the Eastern Shore to Kansas, and for reminding us that sometimes what's out there finds us. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to us on YouTube, hit the bell so you don't miss the next mystery, and share this one with a friend who's in a Bigfoot, Maryland, or just a good mystery in the woods. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, follow the show and consider leaving a quick review. It helps new listeners discover what we've got going on here. And if you've had your own Bigfoot encounter, especially in Maryland, Kansas, or anywhere in between, I'd love to hear about it. So please shoot me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. And also, make sure to mark your calendars. Sasquatch Summerfest is happening July 11th through the 12th at Green Waters Park in Oak Ridge, Oregon. And Bigfoot Society listeners can grab a 2-day pass for the price of 1-day admission with code BFS at checkout. So visit www.sasquatchsummerfest.com for tickets. And thanks again for being part of the Bigfoot Society. Until next time, keep your eyes open, trust your instincts, and remember, it might not be just the wind out there. So see you in the woods.